At L&M Fine Jewelry, we hand select our diamonds to give you the very best prices possible. Monty knows a great deal when he finds one. Find your great deal at L&M Fine Jewelry.
Your diamond destination.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Samuel Akem here, and I am back with another one. Appreciate you guys for tapping in. Please make sure to hit the like, hit the subscribe button. Please make sure to leave me a comment down below. I appreciate you guys all for tapping in. It was a very exciting week in the second round of the FCS playoffs. Montana fell to South Dakota State. That was an unfortunate turn of events. Montana lost to South Dakota State. That was an unfortunate turn of events. Villanova and Incarnate Word. I thought that game would be pretty close just based off the Villanova defense, and it was close. Our Incarnate Word got the victory 13-6. Rhode Island and Mercer faced off, and another close matchup. Mercer got the victory there in Montana State. We're going to be talking about all of it. It was a pretty interesting week. A few blowouts, but I would say some pretty exciting games for people to watch this week, and we're going to be talking about all of it. So please subscribe right now, like the button, hit the like button, and leave me a comment down below, and we will get straight into it. Okay, Montana fell to South Dakota State 35-18. Their final record is 9-5, and South Dakota State moves to 11-2. They were 7-0 at home, I guess. But they get to move on to the quarterfinals. They will host Incarnate Word. This game for Montana, it was interesting because the Montana offense seemed like it was going to be really, really good early on in the season. It seems like the quarterback switches that they continue to make played a role in the quarterback play that was seen this year. But Ayat was 19 for 32, 231 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He had one pretty tough interception in the red zone where they were probably at least guaranteed 3. I think that at that point they were going with the wind as well, because I know the wind was a factor in the kicking game, because even South Dakota State's kicker had missed a kick that looked like it was pulled by the wind. But he ends up throwing the interception. He was trying to target Cole Grossman, and it was, Tucker Large made a really good play on it and got the interception. The run game was not to be had at all for Montana. South Dakota State's defensive line and linebacking core really did a really good job of leaving nothing to be had in the run game. Ayat was the leading rusher, 9 carries, 25 yards. Xavier Harris had 1 run for 21 yards on a reverse, but then Fanati had 12 rushing yards. Eli Gilman had 12 rushing yards, and it was just not a good game for the run game, in the ground game, and I figured you were probably going to have a pretty good run game against this South Dakota State squad, and there was just really nothing there. From receiver standpoint, Keelan White was the leading receiver with 68 yards. Racanelli had a big touchdown grab late in the game. And that was the thing is, for the most part, Montana had 3 for most of the game, and, not trying to down them or anything, but you see here, for 3 quarters, the most points they had was 3, and then late in the fourth quarter, they put up 15 points. So, they really tried to, get some points at the end. But really, when it comes down to it, South Dakota State's defense really did a really good job on Montana. They really stopped them from having any motion at all. The passing game, there was a few throws that Ayat had early on in the game on fade routes targeted at Keelan White, where it seemed like he could have got something, but he didn't. And then, the defense, I think they did a decent job. I think with this defense, you become accustomed to, because they only gave up 23 points to this even better South Dakota State offense last year. And I think a lot of times at this point in the season, when you have a defense similar to what Montana had, is, you're going to give up points. You need your offense to answer. And, you have to be able to, one side has to be able to help the other side. I know Montana in years in the recent past have had better defenses, but this year that defense just wasn't as potent as they have been in the past, and I think it came to bite them. I mean, it just was a weird season for the Grizz. The offense seemed to click at times against lesser opponents, but it seemed like when they played better competition, the offense really couldn't get things going. And then from the defensive standpoint of things, I think they had their issues all year, and those just eventually got them. But South Dakota State looks like they got a really good squad. Obviously, these points, only 18. I don't know what their average is this year. I think it might be like 15 or 14 is what they're giving up this year. They've had a really good season defensively. Some people think Sam Herder being one of those people. I think he just wrote an article last week talking about how the defense may be better. Or I think he commented on somebody's article. Somebody wrote an article about it, and they fit the billing, man. They can play man coverage. They can keep you out of anything. Their D-line is able to get pressure, but their D-line also stops the run with those linebackers. I mean, they play sound football. They're not going to try to pressure you too much, but, they're just going to be in the right spots, and they hustle a ton. So South Dakota State got the victory against Montana, and, Montana is going to go into a pretty big rebuild. Now you got, Junior Bergen is going to be leaving. Aaron Fonts is going to be leaving. Keelan White is going to be leaving. Cole Grossman is going to be leaving. Nick Osmo is going to be gone. And then, you don't want to be pessimistic, but you don't know what's going to happen in terms of the transfer portal. So that's something that teams in this landscape always have to be on the lookout for. In terms of NIL, can you provide what the players want or, may need? And I don't know where Houck lands on that spectrum of wanting to pay NIL or wanting to not pay NIL, and I don't know. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see what happens this offseason. I think Montana's got some good young talent, but I think some of that good young talent may potentially get targeted from some G5 or Power 5 schools. Who knows? I mean, that is the landscape that we live in these days, and that's a conversation that has to be had. I mean, it just has to be had. So I don't know what's going to happen from Montana's standpoint. I'm sure there'll be maybe one or two players jumping in the portal, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Back to the South Dakota State-Montana game. One person who I think really had a really good game, Griffin Wilde, 7 receptions, 114 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had a really nice post route that he hit against on Trevin Gradney. They caught him in a good matchup, one-on-one, basically in the zone, and it was Gradney versus Wilde, and Wilde got the best of him on the post. And then another time when they had one-on-one, it was a third and forever, like 3rd and 18 or something, in the red zone though, but they were just backed up pretty far, and Wilde one-on-one with Gradney gets him turned around on the deep out route and another touchdown over the pylon. Just a really, really good game from Wilde. Gornowski was 12 for 16, 151 yards, 2 touchdowns. I mean, Amar Johnson, 16, 103, no touchdowns, but they just played really clean football. Really, really clean football. And, Montana had to make the most of their opportunities when they had them, and they just weren't able to. So, they're going to be moving on. Incarnate Word. I think that's going to be a pretty exciting game. I can give my thoughts about that game later, but Montana finishes the season 9-5, and 9-win season still looks good. But I was talking to somebody, it's like, 9-5, 9 looks good, but then 5 is like, I think it might have been Denny Bedard that said that on the post-game show after the game, and it's true. That 5, that's a lot of losses. I mean, 9 wins is great. I mean, I think you still can take some positives from this season, but I think coming off the heels of what the team was last year, I think it's kind of surprising how far this team had fallen from that. I mean, you're talking about a team that just played in an FCS championship game for all the marbles, 1 loss on the season up to that point, and it just seems like this season it's been night and day. I mean, they still had the same talent. I think they still understood what they had done the year before, but I don't know. I got a lot of thoughts about, I don't know. It's tough. But, they'll go into the offseason trying to answer some of these questions, trying to see if they can shore up the roster. I know Montana's going to be in the portal too, so you got to think about that factor as well. But we will see. I am done talking about the South Dakota State-Montana game. We'll now be talking about South Dakota State and Incarnate Word. But, I will move.
Treasure State University of Montana football is a way of life. Lithia Ford has long been a proud sponsor of Grizz football, and Lithia Ford of Missoula is thrilled to have several of the best Montana football seniors driving the best trucks in Montana. Aspen Sound is the premier car audio and accessory shop in Montana. Aspen Sound makes sure the boys are riding in style with tinted windows and state-of-the-art stereo systems. There's always a party in Montana. Whether you're going to a concert, a wedding, or a football game, the Montana Party Bus will get you there. Skyline Sports and ESPN MT cover the Big Sky with more depth than anyone. Check out SkylineSportsMT.com and tune in to Nuanez Now on 102.9 ESPN Missoula every day. My Montana Roots and Wear Your Roots clothing is your go-to spot for the most unique and comfortable lifestyle clothing you'll find anywhere. And get your custom t-shirts to support your favorite player. From 5 local businesses who love Montana, best of luck to the Grizz as they pursue another Big Sky Conference championship.
Okay, Montana State took on UT Martin in the second round of the FCS playoffs. Following that bye, seems like they got some of their players that were down were healthy. I don't know if Julius Davis was healthy. They had another running back, number 31, playing in the game. So I'm not sure from that standpoint. But also, Scott Trey Humphrey did play. Rohan Jones did not play. So, a few players on that team that you would have expected to be playing. Interested to see what's going on with them. But Montana State got the big-time dub against UT Martin. I thought this game might be interesting because UT Martin was a better run-stopping team, and they proved to be. Montana State only rushed for 204 yards, but where they made up for it was through the arm of Tommy Mellott. 22 for 25, 300 yards, 4 passing touchdowns. I mean, I think I was talking to Coulter this week on the Big Sky Breakdown, if I'm not mistaken, about could Tommy Mellott throw if he needed to throw, and I mean, 22 for 25, 300 passing yards, his first 300 passing yard game of his career, 4 touchdowns. I mean, he shut me right up. You can't argue with the results. Scott Trey Humphrey still did rush for 100 yards. Adam Jones still had 45 rushing yards. Both had a touchdown. Ty McCullough, 2 had a rushing touchdown. Ryan Lonergan was their leading receiver, 3 receptions, 90 yards. He had a long 48-yard reception, big time play. I mean, Montana State just. They looked really good on offense. And there were some throws that Tommy Mellott made, one particularly to Taco Dowler in the back of the end zone. They ran the deep crossing route that they run all the time, and Tommy Mellott just placed it beautifully. He had some other really good throws in the game, but, I mean, he was just, I know for a fact at least one of his incompletions was a batted ball from a defensive back, from a D lineman or a linebacker. But I can't remember the other two, but still, I mean, he just flawless. UT Martin, really, it was the Montana State defense that held UT Martin back. They really couldn't get anything going on the offensive side of things. They were just all out of sorts. Their quarterback didn't play terribly, but he wasn't super efficient. So in their run game, they really had nothing in the running game. You see Patrick Smith being their leading rusher with 32 rushing yards. I mean, you just can't get it done that way. You can't get it done that way, especially when you're playing against a Montana State offense that is putting points up at a rapid rate. If you can't keep up, you're going to get lost in the wash. They did have a receiver, 6 receptions, 170 yards. They made it interesting late in the first half, and you thought maybe there would be a lane there, but Montana State completely shut the door on that in the second half, and it was a roll away. But Trevante Rucker had a pretty good game, 100 yards, 6 receptions, 2 touchdowns, 1 really long post reception, good ball from the quarterback. They caught Montana State in an advantageous coverage for themselves, had a post going right down the middle of the field, and the receiver did the rest with his legs. So that's the one bright spot for UT Martin, but this was really all Montana State in this game. 200 rushing yards, so that's probably going to drop their average a little bit, but still just a really clean game from Montana State. They didn't really shoot themselves in the foot at all. Didn't see exactly what the team stats were, but pretty good on third down, 50% on third down. UT Martin was 7 for 19, 500 total yards. I mean, right around their average for total yards in a game. I think it's actually higher than that, because I think either way. I think that's, I don't know, man, but they're just really good job. So 4 penalties, 35 yards, 7 for 62 for UT Martin, and they had some of the noise penalties where some guys may have been offside or may have been false starting, and just things that you can't have. But Montana State is still looking like the same Montana State that they've been looking like all season. I think as the season has progressed, they've looked better and better, as teams should. But, early on in the season, those 2 sack fumbles that ended up being touchdowns against New Mexico, I think that's night and day of a team that they are. They play much better defense now. They gave up a ton of offensive success to that New Mexico team. But, they gave up 14 points to defensive touchdowns, so it's not much you could do. But they're playing a really good brand of football right now. Still for rushing 200 rushing yards, 200 on the ground, 500 through the air. That is a game of all games. Great job on this Montana State squad to take out UT Martin, who falls to 9-5 Montana State's now 13-0. They will move on and face Idaho, which I think could be a pretty interesting game. Idaho was a little beat up when they played the first time. I know they're going to have a bone to pick. They're coming right back to Bozeman, though, so they'll be the second time that they're in Bozeman this year. I wonder what kind of influence that has, like a second time a team's playing in a stadium for a season, so, you should be more comfortable with the noise. I remember it was a night game on ESPN2 the first time they played. Now you should be more comfortable with the noise. Now you should be more comfortable with everything that's going on. I mean, who knows? I do know this, and this is what I'll say, and this is not to argue against Montana State, but I do know it's hard to beat a team twice. And that is a saying that is as old as however long ago you want to take it back. It's hard to beat the same team twice. And, I know Idaho will have a bone to pick with them. That quarterback, Jack Lane, who didn't get a piece of them, will want to do something about it. Jordan Dwyer, Mark Hamper, that Idaho offense looked really, really good yesterday against Lehigh. So if they can put some pressure on that Montana State defense and maybe get some stops on the defensive side for themselves, I think it could make for a pretty good matchup. Big Sky After Dark. I cannot wait. It's going to be a really good game. But Montana State gets the victory against UT Martin. You guys let me know what you guys think about that down below, and I will move on. Okay, Idaho faced off against Lehigh in the second round of the FCS playoffs. They moved to 10-3. They got the victory in the Kibbie Dome. They will now be on the road for the road or neutral, if they make it that far, for the remainder of the playoffs. They got the victory against Lehigh, 35-13. Jack Lane, I think, played a pretty good game, 16 for 22, 318 yards, 3 touchdowns. I mean, he was on it. Jordan Dwyer really had a big game, 7 for 166, 2 touchdowns. He made some big time plays in this game. I mean, he was balling. The run game wasn't really there for Idaho. Deshaun Buchanan had 15 for 42, but Lehigh did a pretty good job of stopping the run for Idaho. But I mean, their defense played a really good game. Idaho's defense was really stymieing the Lehigh offense. Their quarterback threw for 143 yards. He was 13 for 27. He threw an interception. Their leading rusher had 74 yards. Their leading receiver, Mason Humphrey, 6 for 98. I mean, they didn't play terribly, but I mean, a lot of these numbers, you notice where they come from. Idaho's defense did a really good job especially when they got in the red zone. I mean, Coach Eck was talking at halftime, and he was talking about how they needed to stop them from getting points in the red zone, but he was like, we got to stop them from getting down there in the first place. So, their defense really shored things up for them. And I think if they can play this type of defense, they did give up 169 rushing yards to Lehigh. So that is something to pay attention to. 169 rushing yards, mainly from the quarterback position with that 69 rushing yards, and then from Luke Yoder, that 74 yards. That's something that you got to be on the lookout for when you're playing against a Montana State team. But also, I mean, Tommy Mellott showed yesterday that if you ask him to throw the ball, if the run game isn't as successful as you want it to be, I mean, they still had 200 rushing yards. But if it's not as successful, as potent as you want it to be, can Tommy Mellott's arm beat you? And I think yesterday he answered all those questions. I mean, 22 for 25, 300 passing yards, and 4 touchdowns. Sheesh. That is lethal. Lethal right there. So Idaho will take on Montana State. I think that'll be a pretty interesting game. Jack Lane is playing good ball right now. It's pretty interesting to think that Idaho, and this just came to my mind, Idaho, a lot of people thought Idaho should have been the 6th seed, and had they been the 6th seed, they'd be taking on South Dakota State right now. Just based on seeing both teams, I feel like Idaho facing off against Montana State is probably a better matchup right now than it would be if they were to face South Dakota State. I think it's just different circumstances. I think, they would much rather be in that position as well. Especially you get your get back. But, Lehigh had a good season. They finished the season 9-4. They only played 11 regular season games. And then they played a first round game and now the second round game. So they finished 9-4. They won the Patriot League. So good for them. I mean, the Patriot League is decent. You got Lafayette, who was a first-round exit last year, so Lehigh made it further than them. You got, what else am I thinking about? Lafayette, Fordham, Holy Cross, I believe, won that league last year. But the league wasn't super strong this year. But credit to Lehigh, they beat the CAA champion. So can you say the Patriot is better than the CAA? Maybe. I mean, Richmond was undefeated. I know all those CAA teams don't play each other, and so you don't get to get the best champion all the time. That's why I think there should be championship games in FCS ball. You need to do divisions or something. There needs to be a championship game to decide a true champion. But with playoffs and all the timing, it just wouldn't work out. But Lehigh was a formidable opponent, but they fell at the Kibbie Dome to the Idaho Vandals, who get the big-time home victory, and now they are looking at facing off against the Montana State Bobcats. I think that is going to be a very, very interesting matchup, and I'll have my thoughts about that later. You guys let me know what you guys thought about this Lehigh versus Idaho game. What did you see from Idaho, and what do you think? What do you expect from them this next week? Let me know down below, and I will move on. Okay. Lan Larison was back to doing Lan Larison things. UC Davis faced off against the Illinois State Redbirds, and I was wrong. I thought maybe this game could have been close. I said on the Big Sky Breakdown, I thought this game potentially could be close. I said on the pregame show, I thought this game could be close. This game was not close. 42-10. UC Davis had control of this game for most of the game. I think Illinois State jumped out to a 7-0 lead, but I think after that, it was all UC Davis for the rest of the day. Miles Hastings, 25 of 33, 403 passing yards, 3 touchdowns. Lan Larison, 22 carries, 104 yards, 3 touchdowns, 3 receptions, 87 yards. CJ Hedden was their leading receiver, 7 receptions, 104 yards. But, I mean, just these guys, man. Miles Hastings had a day. Oh, my goodness. I mean, the Illinois State quarterback didn't have a terrible day. 30 for 48, 233 yards. That's a lot of incompletions. 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Their run game didn't do much. I mean, it was really the passing game difference statistically when you look at it. I remember I was watching much of this. I was watching quite a bit of this game. I saw the long reception from Lan Larison. But, I mean, UC Davis is looking like a formidable team, and their defense stood up to the task. I know that was a question mark that I had about UC Davis, is sometimes they can have a tendency to give up some points at times. You know, Sac State, a team that was near the bottom of the Big Sky this year. Sac State was able to put up a ton of points against them, and 39 points. I think the final score was 42-39. But I remember, Sac State put up a ton of points, and it's a rivalry game. But still, what does that say about your defense? I do know Sac State always has some weapons, and their quarterback is a good young player. But that was a little concerning there. But they answered all those questions in a second-round matchup against Illinois State. I can't remember what seed Illinois State was, but they got the victory, 42-10. Big time game. UC Davis will now take on – who are they playing next? UC Davis is now taking on South Dakota. This could get interesting. South Dakota versus UC Davis. I really don't know. Defense is going to definitely challenge that UC Davis offense. It's going to be interesting. But, Illinois State got the big victory last week on the road, even though they were the higher seed. They got the victory against SEMO in a game where, and I think this spoke about their offense when this happened to them, but they had 8 turnovers in the game against Southeast Missouri, and they still only won by 8. I mean, if that ain't an indictment on your offense, your defense is giving you the ball back ton of times, and you're not taking advantage of it. I mean, that says something about your offense, and their offense spoke loud and clear in a second-round matchup against UC Davis. They were completely outmatched. Their receiver, Daniel Sobkowitz, had a pretty good game, but outside of that, it was all UC Davis in this game. First downs, 26 each. Third down efficiency, UC Davis won that. Total yards, UC Davis won that. Passing, UC Davis. Rushing, UC Davis. Penalties, UC Davis had more. But time of possession, this is something I notice about UC Davis a lot of times. They don't always lead in the time of possession battle. And I think that's because at times they go pretty fast with their offense. So I think that's why they're usually on the lower end of the time of possession. But also they might have just been scoring so fast that, Illinois State was using most of the time. It's not a huge discrepancy right there. But also you throw in an interception in there. not taking advantage of your opportunities at all in your matchup against matchup against UC Davis, and it comes to bite you. So UC Davis, South Dakota, next matchup, I think that could be a pretty good game. I would honestly probably take, I don't know, because South Dakota and Tarleton just played a really good game, a really, really close matchup, and I feel like that game could have gone either direction, but at the end, South Dakota pulled it out. I don't know, because South Dakota has had one of the best defenses in the country all season, and then you watch them against Tarleton, and they were able to make things happen. And now with South Dakota, I think South Dakota is going to be playing at home. I think, yeah, because they're the 4th seed. UC Davis is the 5th seed. So you get a home round matchup, but what is it? Is your offense going to answer the bell? Is your defense going to answer the bell? I mean, because this past week against Tarleton, they showed that they can be had. But we will get into that. Let me know what you think about this UC Davis versus Illinois State game. What did you see from UC Davis' offense? I see Miles Hastings staring at me. 3 touchdowns, 400 passing yards, just another stellar game from him. And then Lan Larison, almost 200 yards of offense, another stellar game from him. You guys let me know what you guys think in the comments, and I will move on. Okay. South Dakota and Tarleton played in Vermillion, South Dakota. It was a very interesting matchup. I thought Tarleton might have been playing spoiler here. They unfortunately weren't able to play spoiler, but I do want to give another shout out to the United Athletic Conference. They got 3 teams into the playoffs this year. They got 2 teams that got first round victories, and they took both their opponents. ACU's got a little bit out of hand, ACU and NDSU, but Tarleton, went down to the wire with the number 4 seed, and this is a conference that I felt was, been piecemealed together from teams from other conferences. You bring Southern Utah in, I don't have the conference right in front of me, but you bring Southern Utah in, then you bring Utah Tech into the conference. Eastern Kentucky, West Georgia just moved up, is in the conference. North Alabama, Austin Peay coming from the OVC. Central Arkansas, who I think was in the Southland, comes. They got a bunch of teams from a bunch of different conferences forming the United Athletic Conference, and I think they play good ball this year. Abilene Christian 9-5, Tarleton State 10-4 to finish the season. Eastern Kentucky is 8-5. Southern Utah was 7-5 with one of the best running backs in the country on their team, and then Central Arkansas 6-6. Everybody else pretty mediocre, but I think they play good football, and the playoff committee felt so too, getting them 3 teams into the playoffs. Really good job from the UAC conference. But Tarleton fell to South Dakota. Really, Tarleton jumped out early in this game, and then South Dakota settled in, and they answered some of the offensive success of Tarleton. And here you see the stats. Tice had 25 carries, 130 yards, 3 touchdowns. Big-time game from him. Aiden Bauman was 18 for 22, 213 yards, 2 touchdowns. Carter Bell, 5 receptions, 98 yards, and a touchdown. Pretty solid offensive performance. Pretty efficient game from Aiden Bauman. Good rushing game from the running back. They had 300 rushing yards. Charles Pierre, 9 for 80. 1 for 70 for Karan Adams, and a touchdown. When you rush for 300 rushing yards, that's a game that you feel like you're either in or you're going to win. Kayvon Britton, 24 for 86. This is really like the X factor for Tarleton State. I think they go as he goes, and he didn't really have the strongest game yesterday, so I think that's kind of part of the piece that hurt them. But their quarterback threw for almost 400 yards, 380 yards, passing 379, but 3 interceptions right here. You can't have it, especially on the road. They lost by 11. You take away maybe even one of those interceptions, maybe you do a better job. But when you turn over the ball at a rapid rate, Darius Cooper, my goodness. I saw Darius Cooper to start the season against, he finished the season with 1,450 yards. Just a phenomenal game from him. A phenomenal season from him. 76 receptions, 1,450 yards, 14 touchdowns. Are you kidding me? That is a ridiculous season. I remember the first game of the season, I saw him against McNeese State, because I think they played on week 0. Tarleton and McNeese State played on week 0, and obviously I was tapping in because I covered a lot of the Big Sky. Obviously I went to Montana. Clifton McDowell was there last year, and I just wanted to see it. And I remember Darius Cooper jumped out to me. I was like, man, that receiver's got some juice. And lo and behold, he goes off Probably one of the leading receivers by yardage in the FCS. I don't have the stats right in front of me, but I mean, just an amazing game. So you have that from the Tarleton offense. I mean, their quarterback had 380, but the 3 interceptions is really what's gonna put you out of reach. So now South Dakota moves on. They're gonna be facing UC Davis. I think that is gonna be. I think that's going to be a pretty interesting game, just from the standpoint of, that South Dakota has a pretty good defense and UC Davis has a really good offense. I mean, their quarterback threw for unimaginable. He threw for 400 passing yards in this last game, 3 touchdowns if I'm not mistaken. He just had a really clean game, and I think it's going to take a really clean game to beat them. I think South Dakota's D-line is really good. So, but UC Davis is not a team that, depends on the run game a lot too. So we'll see how that affects them. But, I don't want to get too deep into that UC Davis South Dakota game because I'm going to talk about it a little later. 10-2 season and moving on for South Dakota. The reason they're 10-2, their record seems a little different from a lot of people's. They played one less game. Their game got canceled against Portland State for whooping cough, which I don't think has happened a ton. I don't know the last time that happened, but Tarleton State finished their season 10-4. The UAC, I believe, had one 10-win team in Tarleton, another 9-win team. I mean, not a terrible season for them. They fought hard, but once you get deep into the playoffs, it's the haves and the have-nots, and you gotta bring your lunch pail with you. The reason I was stumbling over my words, I'm on the FCS website. I was trying to find the stats, but it doesn't look like it's going to be pulling up anytime soon. Either way, Tarleton falls to South Dakota. What do you guys think about this game? What do you guys think about the South Dakota squad? What do you guys think about their upcoming matchup? Leave it all in the comments, and I will move.
Join Town Pump's Pump It Up Rewards Plus program and never pay full price for fuel again.
Save 5 cents on every gallon every day at any Town Pump across Montana.
Plus, earn and redeem points on your favorite in-store items to get free stuff with our clubs.
Stop in and pick up a rewards card. Download the Pump It Up Rewards Plus app today.
Or visit townpump.com/rewards to register and start saving.
Right down the road, pump it up, oh yeah.
Okay, the last game I want to give my reaction to is the North Dakota State versus Abilene Christian game. It was a pretty good game in Fargo, North Dakota. It started out heavily overweighted for the in Abilene Christian's favor. They jumped out to a quick 17-3 lead, but then in as quick as you can snap your fingers, they had a kickoff return for North Dakota State, and after that, Abilene Christian just seemed like they were overmatched. There was an interesting play. They went for a 4th and 14 on their own 35-yard line, 36-yard line, and that was really one of the plays that kind of, I don't know if it's a signal that they're throwing the white flag, but it definitely was an interesting play call at a time when they were up by 7. It was 17-10 at that point. You're going to go for it on 4th and 14, a reverse punt, a fake reverse punt. But I just didn't agree with the play call. There was a few other times where they were close, but they really couldn't get a stop against the North Dakota State offense. Cam Miller really played a really good game. They didn't run the ball super successfully, but it really the passes and turnovers as well. They had 2 interceptions, 1 interception for a touchdown. So when you put all of it together, the offensive success for North Dakota State, the lack of the success for the Abilene Christian offense, I mean, it was an ugly game. Statistically, Cam Miller, 20 for 29, 274 yards, 3 touchdowns, and interception. See, this is what I'm talking about with the run game. Shamar Brown, the Jerry Rice Award winner, 16 carries, 58 yards, no touchdowns. But then you got Bryce Lance, who had 5 receptions, 70 yards, and a touchdown. He ran a really, really good route on a post on the defensive back of Abilene Christian. My goodness. Sam Hicks had a long 90-yard touchdown. He had a pretty good game last week, too. I think he had over 100. He had quite a few yards last week as well. He's been playing good ball this year. McIver, they had just got their quarterback back. He was out last week, 2 interceptions. That was really the difference in the game. You see them replaying it right there, that interception. And then they had another one that went to the house. It was all NDSU. After that 17-3 lead, it was all NDSU. Abilene Christian was able to get a few touchdowns, but statistically, not even statistically, just it was really up front. North Dakota State just settled in, and they made a lot of plays. They made Abilene Christian didn't really help themselves out on, creating some long down and distances at times with the penalties. And like I say, it's so true for the playoffs now, is when you get people in advantageous situations, you have to take advantage. And Abilene Christian at times didn't take advantage or didn't help themselves out advantage-wise, and it really came to bite them. They get a 20-point loss. I know the interception was late in the game. But 51-31, North Dakota State put up a ton of points with the help of their defense, and Abilene Christian just couldn't hang. I mean, they were able to move the ball at times, Abilene Christian was, but it was when they needed to get stops, when they needed to force a field goal, they ended up giving up touchdowns, and it's the difference, man. It's the difference. Last time, because this is the last UAC team I'm talking about this year, the UAC deserves the respect. They've had a really good season. The conference deserves some respect. In general, they had 3 playoff teams, 2 make it to the second round. I know, what are we, giving out participation trophies? No. But in the grand landscape of the FCS, I think it's good to see other conferences make things competitive, make things interesting. And now, obviously, both these teams lost. But I think it speaks volumes that you look at a Montana team that lost to South Dakota State. It was one of the blowouts for the day yesterday. They lost 35-18. And obviously ACU loses by 20. But there was a point in the game where you thought it was going to be interesting, where they might have been able to make things interesting. And I don't think they were very far off in this game either. But then also you look at the South Dakota game. That's one of the best defenses in the country. And Tarleton took them to the brink. Now, eventually South Dakota handled things in the end and got the victory. But I think it speaks volumes that these teams are fighting, getting a look, getting a taste of it. Tarleton, I believe this is their first year that they were playoff eligible. So, for them to get that close, to potentially making it to a quarterfinal game, who's telling? Hopefully that the portal keeps benefiting these teams. Those teams are down in Texas, Abilene Christian and Tarleton down in Texas. They got a ton of talent down there. If you can convince some kids to come play at your school, I don't think there's much in Abilene Christian, and I don't know about Tarleton. I don't know where their school is at. But if you can get some kids to come down and play for you guys, I think that the UAC may have some potential. But North Dakota State's going to move on. They will face off against... Gosh, now I'm forgetting. They will face off against Mercer next round. Mercer had a pretty good game against Rhode Island. They only gave up 10 points to Rhode Island, but they only scored 17 on Rhode Island. So, very interesting from that point. Can the Mercer defense do a better job of slowing down Cam Miller and the North Dakota State offense? I think ACU did a decent job, but, you got to protect the ball on the offensive side of things, and they didn't do that, and you got to take advantage when you have an advantage. I don't know, man. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting. But North Dakota State versus Mercer. But Abilene Christian finished their season. They'll fall to 9-5. Another 9-5 team to finish their season with those 12 regular season games for a lot of these teams. 11-2 for North Dakota State. They stay at home, being the number 2 seed. They don't have to leave until the national championship, if they make it there. But they got a quarterfinal matchup against Mercer, and I'm very excited to see it. But what did you guys think about this North Dakota State ACU game? Did you think it was interesting? Does it tell you anything about the UAC? Does it tell you anything about North Dakota State? I think their defense is, I don't know. I think there's better defenses in the country than North Dakota State based off what I've seen. But, they only lost one FCS game this year. So, and it lost on a last-second play. So... they've done enough to win, that's for sure. We will see, though. You guys let me know what you thought about this, and I will move on. Okay, I wanted to give my overall thoughts about the second round of the FCS playoffs as we take a look at the full scope of things. Obviously, you got the HBCUs here, but as you take a look at the full scope of what took place this week in the FCS playoffs, I thought it was a pretty good round. You had a decent game in the nightcap with Lehigh and Idaho, but I think Abilene Christian, North Dakota State was pretty exciting. Rhode Island Mercer was very close. Incarnate Word versus Villanova was close, and an interesting game. And then Tarleton, South Dakota was also another close game that was super exciting to watch. Obviously, UC Davis, Illinois State was a blowout. Montana State versus UT Martin was a blowout. And South Dakota State versus Montana was also another blowout. They made it close, not close. They made it to where they put some points up at the end of the game, but it was really not close throughout most of the game. When you look at the next round coming up, I think it's going to be very exciting with some of the second round playoff games. But, looking back on some of the teams that are out now, another Big Sky team falls, but you still got 3 Big Sky teams still moving on to the next round, 2 of which will be facing each other. And then you got North Dakota State beating Abilene Christian, so they'll face off against Mercer. That might be the biggest point differential game in this next round, in the quarterfinal. Mercer versus North Dakota State. But when you look back at everything, all the highest seeds won. South Dakota State being the 3 seed, they won. Incarnate Word, 6 seed, won. Mercer being the 7 seed, they won. Montana State, 1 seed, won. North Dakota State, 2 seed, they won. 4 seed in South Dakota, they won. UC Davis in the 5th seed, they won. In Idaho in the 8th seed, they won. So I always wonder, is this a good look on the committee when the seeds win, when they make it to where they're supposed to be, or is it a good thing on the committee when there's upsets? I think they both benefit the picking of the committee because, I don't know, because when you upset, when there's an upset, that's probably better for the committee because it's like, oh, see, we told you that team. I don't know. I'd love to be a fly on the wall of a committee member and, what goes into thinking, like, what makes a good playoff bracket? If somebody knows in the comments, let me know. What do you think makes a good playoff bracket? What is something that, gets you excited? What is considered when that happens, you're like, oh, that was good for FCS football. I don't know, but the second round was very interesting. I thought it was more exciting than the first round. Just some of the games to watch. I watched a little bit of Rhode Island, Mercer, and Incarnate Word and Villanova. They were close throughout most of the game. They were pretty boring, to be honest, because there was a lot of defense being played. But I remember watching those early, and then obviously the Montana South Dakota State game is one that I was locked into. Montana State, UT Martin. North Dakota State, Abilene, I remember when that game came out, I immediately turned it on when I saw what was going on early. Same with South Dakota State. South Dakota and Tarleton, turned that one on as well early on when I saw what was going on. And then the Idaho Lehigh game, I had that one on, but Idaho was pretty in control of that one. It's going to be an interesting third round, quarterfinal round of the FCS playoffs. But what did you guys think about the second round of the FCS playoffs? Did you guys think it was exciting? Was it boring for you? Do you think that, what do you think is going to be the most interesting next round matchup? You guys let me know in the comments, and I will move on. Okay, we are going to give a preview and some predictions for the quarterfinal round of the SCS playoffs. I've been itching at each time I have one of these segments in the show. I keep trying to hint at talking about the next round, and this is the conversation I want to have about the next round of the FCS playoffs. So we're looking at the next round's matchups. There will be a Friday evening matchup, Big Sky After Dark in Bozeman. Should be an exciting game. You got Tommy Millott and the boys. Idaho is coming back to Bozeman with their guy at quarterback. Not that Jack Wagner and Nick Josefek is not their guy, but Jack Lane coming back with a vengeance. Come on, man. Come on. What are we talking about? This is what it's about. 13-0 Montana State is going to take on 10-3 Idaho. Should be a freaking super exciting matchup. I cannot wait. You get to see some of the last opponents for Idaho and Montana State. I mean, that doesn't matter. That does not matter. What matters is Idaho is going to Montana State with a bone to pick. I think this is a super exciting matchup. I think it's super interesting. The main key matchup is the run game. How does Idaho stop the run game? I know they have a big defensive line, but Keyshawn James Newby isn't the biggest player. Their defensive tackles aren't the hugest guys either, and that proved to be the case the first time they matched up. Idaho State was really no match for the offensive line of Montana State. When you look at the first matchup that they played, I got it pulled up right here. You look at some of the stats that Idaho was able to put up: 134 yards passing for Jack Wagner, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, 91 rushing yards. You look at what Montana State did. Tommy Millott had 140. Scott Trey Humphrey had 120. Adam Jones had 39. Tommy Millott was 11 for 15. He threw for 2 touchdown passes as well. 3 receivers with 28 receivers. I mean, they just executed at a high level, and Idaho's defense couldn't do anything to stop them. So when you look at the first matchup, It wasn't so much in Idaho's favor. And is that because of the Montana State defense, or is that because of them playing with a backup quarterback who wasn't, picked to be the starter this year? So maybe he doesn't want to run the offense at the highest of efficiency. Who knows? All of that goes out the window, though. This is a new season. I'm so glad we get to see this rematch up with both teams. Hopefully, as close as 100% as possible. I know both teams have suffered some injuries since then, or maybe even that night there were some injuries that happened. But we get a rematch in Bozeman. It's going to be super exciting. I mean, two really good coaches in Brent Vegan and Jason Eck. I mean, what more can you ask for? What more can you ask for? It's going to be super exciting. That is the first game of the weekend for the quarterfinals. That'll be Idaho versus Montana State. So they'll get maybe a little bit of extra rest unless they play on Friday the next week, the following week. Next, you have Incarnate Word and South Dakota State. Now, I know Incarnate Word might want some get back against South Dakota State since they beat them earlier in the season. Incarnate Word seemed to play some pretty good defense yesterday in their matchup against Villanova. They only gave up 6 points, but South Dakota State is a whole different beast. I know you guys played earlier in the season. South Dakota State beat them, but I still like South Dakota State in this game. Personally, I think, they look pretty on a mission to get back to where, and I was recently just on the Jax Illustrated podcast, and I did say that I think if anybody gets to the national championship, it will be North Dakota State. I might have to walk back those comments. I obviously just watched South Dakota State yesterday. They look really good. They executed at a high level on offense and defense. I don't know. But against Incarnate Word, I like South Dakota State to handle Incarnate Word. I just don't think their offense is, they couldn't get anything going against Villanova. Villanova is not South Dakota State. So, what type of success are they going to see with their offense against South Dakota State when you struggled against Villanova, who does have a good defense, but you were playing at home, you couldn't get anything going. They got blessed with the weather in Brookings this weekend. I think it was like 50 degrees. You might not have that same blessing this week. It's going to be cold. It's going to be hard to catch the ball, hard to throw the ball. I'm not going to pull up the weather right now, but we will see. Oh, look, we got the weather right here. We don't have to pull up the weather. ESPN's got the weather. So the projected weather for the game looks like 29 degrees in the stadium. They're playing at 10 a.m. I'm on Mountain Time, so that game will probably be at 11 a.m. Central Time. It's going to be cold. It's going to be cold, boys. So I don't know what needs to happen. I don't know how you guys get prepped for that. You guys are down in Texas, deep down in Texas. So hopefully you guys can get some heated seats. Hopefully you guys can get some hand warmers. Hopefully you guys have all the warm gear because it's probably going to be cold. It's going to be cold and it's probably going to be windy too. So good luck to the Incarnate Word Cardinals. They take on the South Dakota State Jackrabbits. That's going to be a pretty interesting game on Saturday at 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. Next, you got UC Davis at South Dakota. This is probably going to be the best matchup of the weekend, to be honest. I think Idaho, Montana State could get interesting. But, dang, I was trying to scroll for more games. There are no more games. Jeez. But I think UC Davis, South Dakota is probably going to be the best game of the weekend. I think these teams are pretty evenly matched. I know statistically, offensively, it's probably favored in UC Davis's favor. But I think this is probably the most even matchup of the round. Just based on all the 4 games you see here. But they will play at 1 p.m. in the Dakota Dome in Vermilion, South Dakota. It's going to come down to Miles Hastings and that South Dakota defense. Is that South Dakota defense really good enough to stop Lan Larison and Miles Hastings, or are they just going to have a field day like they have against everybody else they played? Those are the 2 key playmakers for UC Davis. You have to be able to stop them to be able to come away with the victory. Are they able to do it? We will see. That is the question that needs to be answered and will be answered by the time that game is finished. But the only loss UC Davis has taken in their last 5 is against Montana State. And for South Dakota, it's South Dakota State in that overtime matchup. But, I know what the stats say. I know what everything else says, but, can you stop that UC Davis offense? Your defense has to show up. Tarleton, not to say Tarleton had their way with you guys, but Tarleton was able to put up some points against South Dakota in the second round, and you can't let that happen against UC Davis, because UC Davis is not Tarleton. Not to poo-poo Tarleton. I've been giving them their flowers, the UAC their flowers all day, but we got to get real at some point. UC Davis is a different beast. They got some playmakers on their team, particularly Lan Larison. He is dangerous with the ball in his hands, and that must be accounted for. Must be accounted for. So how do they do that? Who knows? I guess we'll wait and see, but I think that's probably going to be the best game of the weekend. And then finally, the last and final game, start time of the day, is Mercer versus North Dakota State in the Fargo Dome. I don't think North Dakota State will have problems. I like North Dakota State to win this game, but I think it could be low scoring just because of the Mercer defense. They do take the ball away. They play a good brand of football. I don't know. It could be close. It could not. I'm looking at their last 5. They gave up 10 to Rhode Island, but how good was Rhode Island? Furman put up 23 on them. The VMI didn't have any. They gave up 31 to East Tennessee State, but East Tennessee State, they had a time in there where they looked like they were going to be the team in the SoCon, but it was really that game against Mercer that really put them out of their misery for conference play. They did lose one conference game, and that conference game loss came to Sanford. I remember that game. Pretty anticipated game, but Sanford really rolled them. But, looking at this matchup against North Dakota State and Mercer, I think it could be interesting. Maybe, kind of, possibly interesting. But I think, if it is interesting, it's going to be similar to what happened with North Dakota State and ACU. I think Mercer could jump off to a good lead. They could start really, really good, but I think once North Dakota State settles in, really gets their bearings underneath them, I think North Dakota State will take care of business. Now, I could be completely wrong. Mercer obviously is in the quarterfinals and not out of the round in the second round because they're obviously a better team, but they didn't face North Dakota State. They faced Rhode Island. So now they're going to get a real test. Both teams are 11-2. North Dakota State is at home. They're the second highest seed in the bracket, so we'll see. But those are the first round matchups. That's the full slate of first round matchups. You got Idaho at Montana State at 7 p.m. on Friday night in Bozeman. You got South Dakota State versus Incarnate Word in the Tundra in South Dakota. Brookings, South Dakota at 10 a.m. on Saturday. 1 p.m. UC Davis versus South Dakota at 1 p.m. in the Dakota Dome. And then you got 1:30 p.m. Mercer versus North Dakota State in the Fargo Dome. All should be pretty good games, but, UC Davis, South Dakota is the one I have my eye on. I think that's going to be a really interesting game, really exciting game to watch. But you guys let me know. What do you guys think will be the most exciting game in the first round or in the quarterfinal round of the SCS playoffs? Do you think we see some pretty exciting ball all across the board, or do you see some blowouts? I think South Dakota State and North Dakota State versus Incarnate Word and Mercer, I don't know what to think about those. I don't know. And then Montana State, Idaho, I think that's a toss-up of either being a blowout in Montana State's favor or a really close game in either team's favor. But, I don't think there's a chance that Idaho blows Montana State out. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but I don't really see that happen. And I see if Montana State loses, it's in a close game that's, nip and tuck. We will see, though. All going to be really good games. All seeded teams have moved on to the quarterfinals. So we will see what happens. You guys let me know what you guys think about that in the comments, and I will move on. Okay, I want to thank you guys for tapping in this week. The games are getting shorter and shorter. We have less football to talk about each week, and eventually there's only going to be one game that we're going to be talking about. That's going to be the national championship. But we are moving on to the quarterfinals round of the FCS playoffs. I want to thank all of you guys for tapping into the video. If you noticed that I was switching screens and stuff like that, I just got a new laptop. It's moving at the speed of light. As you guys can see, I can fully utilize the capability of OBS now, which is what I shoot these videos on. So now, as you guys saw me switching from one screen, switching to this screen, I can do all of that. And I could do it on my old laptop, but it would be slow, it would be glitchy. I couldn't always go from website to website because my computer was really slow. So just switching over or clicking on a website, it would take so long to pull up. And now, everything is just super fast, super quick, super seamless to move from one to the other. And, that's also partly because I set up my scenes now on OBS. And if you guys have never used OBS, I don't know how to show you because I have it to where it doesn't show my OBS on here, but it's amazing. It's amazing. Also, I wanted to go back on one thing in this video. Darius Cooper at Tarleton State is the leading receiver in the FCS. I knew he was probably up there, but he is, obviously a lot of these guys didn't play in the playoffs, and Incarnate Word's receiver is still playing, but Rhode Island's receiver just finished the season. Abilene Christian's receiver just finished the season. Illinois State. So some of these top guys are in the playoffs, but, Efton Chisholm is, I guess, just some of these guys are just had amazing seasons. 1,450 receiving yards to finish his season, 76 receptions, 14 receiving touchdowns. He is one behind the lead in Landon Ruggieri, who had 15 receiving touchdowns. Just an amazing season. Amazing season for Darius Cooper. He has no reason to be upset. I also want to look at the rushing stats a little bit right here, because I want to know who's at the top of the rushing yardage. Kayvon Britton, 1982. Tarhi Lamson is right below him at 1921. So those two guys really had a really big season. Central Arkansas's running back still had 1,300. I thought he might be more towards the top, but obviously they didn't make the playoffs. But Kayvon Britton, man, great season. That Tarleton team, man, even though I think Kayvon Britton's a senior, I think that receiver Darius Cooper, I know he's a senior, so they're losing some talent. But the reason I get into all of this is because I'm talking about OBS, new laptop, new speed. I appreciate you guys for tapping in. Appreciate you guys for hanging around, watching the channel when I couldn't do so many more things. I'm going to try to add more into my videos now, but I appreciate you guys. Thank you guys so much. Let me know what you guys think about the second round of the playoffs. What do you guys think about the quarterfinals? Are you guys excited about it? Are you guys not? What do you guys think is going to happen? Let me know in the comments down below, and I will catch you guys next time. See ya later.